So what evokes you to write?
I'm moved to write by a desire to tell stories that are not told, by a desire to write ourselves into history. And I think as Black writers, that's really important. Unless we write our own stories, the world acts as if we don't exist. And so I'm moved to write stories that don't exist, whether that's my own story or whether it's bringing to life the stories of other people.
What's your why?
What's my why?
Yeah.
My why for writing is untold stories, unheard voices, silenced narratives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you know what to write?
So I trained as a journalist, and so for me there are different kinds of writing and different energies I bring to my writing. When I'm writing journalism, it's a piece of truth, and it's often stories of other people. I'm trying to give voice to other people's stories. And then when I'm writing like creative nonfiction, that's a different process. It's a process where I can stretch my legs a bit. It's a longer process. It's a more, it's a deeper process.
Yeah.
And then I just bring myself to the page much more than when I'm doing journalism.
What's your writing process, and how do you get the research that you want once you're, in that train of thought?
My process depends on what I'm writing.
Yeah.
Although I like to be really thorough in my research, so I do a lot of research. I was thinking about this morning, I start the process before I'm in front of the page, right? Yeah. So it's not when I sit at the computer that I start. Yeah. I was writing something this morning, and actually I started to write it in my head yesterday. I started to form it and shape it and think about who I wanted to speak to and start to almost see a structure.
Yeah.
And then I sit down, and sometimes I might sit down and it's actually pen and paper first, just thinking through might be a big piece of paper, might be a kind of A4, just thinking through a thought shower, basically getting everything down that is just at the top of my brain, because it's really beautifully disorganized at the beginning, just getting it all down. And then I go to a slightly more process-driven system, right, where then it might go from a kind of a spider web on my notebook into something that goes onto a page, and then that gets layered with research and voices and inspirations, and then that piece starts to be crafted into something. So I start really wide, and then I go in and in and in and in.
Okay. When you're in that process, what problems occurs? What type of problems do you get?
There are so many problems. Sometimes I wonder why people write, because when you're in the middle of it and you can't get to the next piece, the next stage, it feels like you are in a tunnel and you can't see your way out. Yeah. So you can get blocked. So you can get kind of writer's block, which sounds more dramatic than it is, but it's a real thing where you just cannot get to the next idea. Often for me, that means I'm overthinking it. And often for me, a block, it's either that I'm overthinking or that I'm not writing the thing that I really want to write.
Okay.
And so there's something I'm trying to avoid. For me, that's often the writer's, I'm either processing, I'm either overthinking, still in the processing stage, or trying to avoid something. And and so for me, I have to sometimes then step away and let my brain, my body uncover the thing that I'm trying to avoid, the thing that's stopping me, which might be, what will people think? Yeah. Maybe I'm trying to write something that I'm worried people will critique me for, right? Yeah. Or criticize me for, or come at me for. And so I'm trying to write really carefully. Yeah. And I've got what I think will be people's opinions on my shoulder, and that will stop me writing properly. And so it's only when I then give myself permission to write as if no one's going to read it that I'm then freed up.
You actually answered the next question, which is how do you solve your problem?
So if it's something like that, if I'm trying to be really careful, so with my first book, with my memoir, I spent a lot of time worrying about what people think. What would my English family think? What would my Eritrean family think? What would the communities think? And that's a really good way to give yourself writer's block, because suddenly you're like, you're frozen.
Yeah.
And then I decided to write as if it was not going to get published,
Yeah.
as if no one's going to see it.
Yeah.
I was just going to write it, and then I'd go back in and edit if I wanted to edit.
Yeah.
And actually, I didn't end up doing, I mean, I edited, but I didn't edit those things out. But that's what freed me up to write properly.
What's your writing style?
My writing style is open and vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
I like to write in an inclusive way, by which I mean I do like to include as many voices as possible. I often think of my writing as the vehicle for other people who aren't able to get onto the page. It's a huge privilege, right, to be published, whether it's in books, in magazines, any newspapers, anything like that. It's a huge privilege, and not everybody gets that privilege, and I'm really mindful of that privilege. And so I write in a style that opens up those spaces. And I use humour a lot in my writing. Yeah. And I use humour a lot when I talk and when I try to make an argument. I find humour is a really good way in. Yeah. So I bring that to my writing style. I have a writing style that's accessible. I like my writing to be easy to read. Mm-hmm. I think that's a huge compliment. People should be able to understand and read. I don't like writing that's a barrier. Mm-hmm. And so I write deliberately in quite a conversational and accessible tone that's also backed up by research and interviews and other people's stories.
And what's your story structure? Do you have like a 3-act story, 7-act story, or do you have a completely different?
I think because I trained as a journalist, my structure is quite journalistic. Mm-hmm. And is quite, it's like long-form journalism. Mm-hmm. And so I like to bring in facts. I like to bring in like data. I like to bring in the years of research that has gone before me in academia and so on. And I think that's because of how I trained. To
yourself, like, because you must leave out pages. You must leave out things that you wanted to keep. Mm-hmm. How do you maneuver around that? How do you solve that?
So you're talking about the editing process?
The editing process, yeah.
Yeah. Editing is hard, but always makes the writing better. Mm. And so although editing can feel like, you're taking sentences and chunks and pages out, which can feel really difficult, mm-hmm. but that allows the writing to be clearer. So it actually allows the story to come out. So although it feels like you're taking away, sometimes you have to, it's like gardening, I guess. I don't really garden, but like you have to strip away so you can see the beauty of the writing and of the story. Otherwise people can't get into it. Yeah. So you're actually making it much clearer. And to do that, you have to edit. Learning to self-edit is one of the best skills you can give yourself as a writer. Learning not to be too precious. People talk about like killing your darlings. Yeah. You have to sometimes kill your darlings. You have to think, well, this is a beautiful sentence. This sentence is so beautiful. Yeah. And then you look at it and you think, it doesn't work. Or like it's redundant. Why is it there? It's there because it's beautiful. That's not a reason to have a sentence in. If the sentence takes a story off and then you never return in that direction, or if it derails the story, the fact that it's a beautiful sentence is actually an ego piece. You just want everyone to see how beautifully you can write. Yeah. So you're not really thinking about the reader. Yeah. It's ego driven. You're thinking about yourself. And so often the hardest thing is taking things out to make it clear, not to like obstruct the story and not to show off, because you're like, oh, this beautiful sentence, everyone's going to think I'm a genius. Yeah. They're not if they can't get to the story.
Okay, and so that leads me to the final question, is which do you already have an ending, or do you, and when you do have an ending already, how do you start? That makes sense.
I usually I know what I'm trying to get to, and I think it's important to know where you're trying to get to. Although again, with my first book, I didn't have an ending when I started it, mm-hmm. because I hadn't done the journey. I hadn't met my family. I didn't know where it was going to end. But I knew where I was trying to get to. And so you have to know where you're trying to get to, because otherwise the reader can tell that you don't know. And you have to have, I have to have like a beginning, middle and end to be able to like navigate through. Yeah. The ending can change. The journey can change, and it probably should. Yeah. But unless you have a sense of an arc, a sense of a kind of narrative, an arc, a journey, and some of those key elements like the jeopardy and the characters, and unless you have those pieces, it will feel chaotic. And some kind of writing, like some people are geniuses and can write in a chaotic way, but again, that often requires a lot of work of the reader. And so I like to know where I'm trying to get to, but I don't always know how I'm going to get there.
Okay. Talking about your journey, talking about the journey to the beginning and the end, how did your journey start into writing, basically?
My writing journey started with journalism. I did a sociology degree at Liverpool University, and then after that I did a sociology degree. Then I did some work experience at my local newspaper in Manchester, the Manchester Evening News, and then I applied for a scholarship to come to London to study at City University to do a master's in journalism. Okay. And the scholarship was funded by the Guardian Trust, the Guardian News and Media Trust. And I was really lucky. I got that scholarship. That gave me the money to do the course and to move to London. And then as part of that course, I did lots of work experience at various different newspapers. Yeah. And then as part of that, when I finished, I was invited to do a 3-month internship at the Guardian. And then after that, I kept getting my contract extended, and then I got a job. And that was the beginning of my writing career.
What would your advice be to someone that's starting to write or has a passion for writing or even creativity?
If you want to write. Like, it's really simple. Don't wait to be given permission. Don't wait for a job in writing. You can just write. Yeah. There's the thing that defines writers from non-writers is that writers write. It's not about who gets paid and doesn't get paid and does it as a job. You can be a dentist and a writer. Yeah. You can be a doctor and a writer. You can be a plumber and a writer, as long as you're writing. Yeah. There's a different piece around trying to earn a living from your writing, and that's really difficult.
Sorry, yeah.
And it's probably been, it's much easier now to get published because you can self-publish, whether that's books, whether that's online. You can set up your own magazine. You can set up your own website. Yeah. You can get your writing out there in a way that is really exciting, and then people will read it. Yeah. It's much harder to make a living off writing these days. Yeah. But it's much easier to get your start.
Okay.
And that depends for all different kinds of writing, whether it's poetry, whether it's non-fiction, fiction, journalism. There are loads of platforms, and if the platform that you want doesn't exist, you can create it.